it you see? Tell me, why do you believe in me? Why do you believe? Would you keep your schedule free for me? I love it here, you pleasing me. Go on, get deep for me. This kind of love is free. This kind of love is free. I wanna see you speak to me. Tell me what it is you need from me. What is it you see in me? Tell me, why do you believe in me? Why do you believe? Would you keep your schedule free for me? I love it here, you pleasing me. Go on, get deep for me. This kind of love is free in me. Go on, I'ma listen, you can speak to me. You can speak, tell me what it is you need from me.
Sitting by you right before Mr. Ammons' class, cause my mama couldn't afford new J's Polo, thrift store, thrift clothes. That was all I knew. Do you remember? I remember when you laughed when I cut my perm off and you rated me a 6. I was like, damn. But even back then with the tears in my eyes, I always knew I was the shit. I like that.
Chase the sun. Oh me, oh me, oh me, oh my. Oh me, oh me, oh me, oh my. Oh me, oh me, oh me, oh my. I like that. used to love myself. Sometimes I lie to myself. Where you going? No one knows. It was perfect in my head. Things are changing, but I'm still here. Wrote down these words, and it seems so clear.
Hello, 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 everyone. We'd like to welcome you all today to the Story Communities Community Stories webinar. We are so excited to have all of you here. We're with my partner in crime, Dominique Miller. I serve as Senior Fellow of the People's Practice at Third Space Action Lab, and she'll get into who she is and what she does. But just want to share a little insight on our firm. We are a Black-owned, Black woman-led firm located in Cleveland, Ohio, created to disrupt the vicious cycle of disinvestment and displacement in low-income communities of color. And we offer grassroots solutions to socioeconomic complexities, whereas we work locally here in Cleveland, Ohio, regionally and nationally. And so with that, we just want to touch on the project that has brought us all here today. We completed Third Space in partnership with Community Opportunity Alliance, a national research project, naming how racism shows up in community development and anti-racist practices look like in resulting the People's Practice platform. And in do so, part of our field building activities, we'll be hosting webinars. This is one of 9, and we'll be doing those on a quarterly basis. So be on the lookout for new news as we continue to progress in this work. Today's webinar is based on the Story Communities and Community Stories project. It's unique in that researchers involved partner with local literary artists to engage residents in examining how community-based development organizations are in relationship with the residents that they serve. And so with that, this study is a part of Grounding Values project Community Opportunity Alliance is implementing. And I'll hand the baton off to Frank Woodruff.
Thank you, Curtis. Hi, everybody. It's so good to see everybody. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the stage a little bit for who we are and why we partnered in the project, and I'll pass it back to our friends at Third Space to dig right in. But as Curtis said, I'm Frank Woodruff. I'm Executive Director at the Community Opportunity Alliance, formerly NACIDA, for those who have been near and dear to our organization in the past. The Alliance is the field building organization for the community development movement. As a field builder, we champion community opportunity for all by supporting practitioners and partners and funders, working to improve the lives of those living in underserved neighborhoods and in communities of color. We believe that just as a prosperous neighborhood can lift all of its residents, a stronger community development field leads to stronger organizations at the local level and ultimately stronger communities. We advocate for those organizations. We have capacity building programs. We convene them. We strengthen their identity as a field, and we do research into them. And our primary research project is Grounding Values in Research. And the Story Communities, Community Stories project is from the Alliance's point of view, part of that research, part of that research program. Grounding Values in Research, we've to date spent about $1 million on the program, trying to answer the question, not necessarily what do the 6,000 local community-based development organizations in this country do, although we asked that question as well. But we are primarily interested in, most urgently interested in who they are. So as you can see on the slide, there's about 5,700 organizations in this country that we've identified, and with the support of many other institutions. They are reaching communities left behind, particularly communities of color. And the goals of the project, have been to raise the visibility of the organizations and the essential role that they play in implementing projects. To understand and distinguish the role they play in the community development system, and identify ways in which the organizations both advance equity both at the local level and within the community development system. I really apologize, my son snuck in. I am going to step away for 10 seconds. I am so sorry. I will be right back. Apologies for that. So the project to date has performed a financial health analysis and conducted a national census. And this last phase of the initial project is diving into something we call issue briefs. The project technically calls issue briefs, and with the storied communities, community stories being the first one. Coming forward in the coming years, similarly to our friends at Third Space, we will have more webinars. I think we're planning 4 of them coming forward. This is the first one coming up on July 26th is our next one. The topic will be human capital in the field and the talent pipeline. And then about quarterly or so thereafter, we will we'll have a couple webinars, so further topics on capacity building in the field, particularly for emerging organizations. We'll have a webinar on production and production barriers. And we will, and then the final topic being public and public policy, and that'll probably be coming early in 2025. So that's my family, my children, apparently. I really apologize for that, but they are beautiful kids. And that's Grounding Values in Research and the Community Opportunity Alliance. So with that, I'm going to transition back to Dominique Miller at Third Space Action Lab. For me, the elements of a true and trusted partner are a couple fold. First, you have to share values. And I think we really do that with our partners at Third Space Action Lab. And kind of what ultimately makes really hard topics like this to explore is how much work it goes into, how much trust and honesty it takes. And I always feel like I have that in a true partner if when we get together for our coordinating meetings and other conversations that we find an opportunity to laugh. And I feel like we did that in probably every meeting that I've ever had with Third Space Action Lab and with Dominique in particular. So with that, I will pass it over to Dominique.
Thank you, Frank. I'm laughing now. I very much appreciate you saying that. Yeah, thank you so much for that framing, and thank you as well, Curtis. As Frank's mentioned, this was one of the issue briefs building on the grounding values study, and the timing for this was really great for Third Space. As Curtis mentioned, we had just completed research around what it will take to advance an anti-racist community development paradigm with the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And some of the things that came out of that as far as what anti-racist community development looked like really was focused on resourcing residents, really increasing support for resident-led projects and programs, increased resident involvement in local financing, participatory budgeting, increasing opportunities for resident ownership, community land trusts, all those sorts of things. So this really felt timely and an opportunity for us to really dig deep into the role of residents in community development and really supplement and support what the Community Opportunity Alliance was doing in their deep study in community-based development organizations, and really get a sense of from the residents' perspective how they perceive these CBDOs in their communities, like what role do they play, how these roles have changed over time, how they're embedding equitable practices in their work and how they can continue to be responsive to communities. This is just an image of the high-level findings from our research report, where you can dig a little bit deeper, if you like, into what stakeholders in community development were saying generally about what anti-racist community development practices look like, but also the role of residents. And so the approach that we took to this project, we picked 4 locations across the country. We're really looking for some diversity, geographic diversity, demographic diversity, thinking about the different types of challenges that are unique to particular areas of the country, and really want to go deep in neighborhoods. So you can see the different organizations that we picked here. Center for Transforming Communities, you'll get to hear from later. So I'm super excited about that. We conducted 56 interviews. We really wanted a range of perspectives. So we had the CBDOs share with us the names of 4 resident leaders who were deeply engaged to interview. And then we also engaged literary artists, knowing that these folks would be able to really, I think, engage folks in a way that we couldn't. They're on the ground, they're in the neighborhood. And so they were able to reach residents that are less engaged with the CBDO to give their perspective. And really engaging artists and researchers, I think, was a crucial role in really getting some of the information that we got there able to reach people in a different type of way. And also created some awesome literary pieces that you can see on our page. And shout out to Kresge, who mandated that we work with artists, which was really in line with how we work anyway. So I just want to shout those folks out in case they're on the call. Also want to share some equitable approaches to research that Third Space tries to take in our work kind of generally. It's important, particularly in working with folks in low-income communities of color, that we try not to be extractive. So it was important that we compensate folks for their time and recognize that their expertise and time is valued. Privacy disclosure, we were really clear about how we plan to use this information, how what they share is going to be used, what's the goal of the project, what's going to happen, with the information. Another really important piece was translation. We had residents that English was not their first language or their primary language. So it was important that we provide that option so that we weren't limiting or not being inclusive with who was able to engage. We tried to minimize jargon and really committed to sharing all the findings with all of the residents. And then we had the findings translated. We only had Spanish-speaking folks. We had to translate it into Spanish so that the folks that engaged were also able to read the findings. So here's just some of the super high level takeaways here. I mean, generally residents are very supportive of what CBDOs do. They find it important. They find community development important. They recognize the importance of compensating residents to support long-term engagement. And this was nothing about financial gain, but it was more so eliminating barriers to entry for residents, so that a wider range of residents would be able to engage and support what the CBDOs are doing. I think one of the biggest pieces that I want to lift up is this middle one about expressing a strong interest in community development narrative and policy. These residents spoke really well to the relationship between dominant negative narratives about their communities and how community development shows up in their neighborhoods. So the lack of access to capital that residents are experiencing and relating that to how folks view their community, not wanting to make investments in their community because of negative stereotypes. For example, challenges with having adequate housing and inequitable policies, and really seeing that linkage between those things and the narratives and perceptions that people have of their neighborhood from the outside looking in. So here are some of the major things that we heard from residents that were less engaged. I mean, they couldn't, of course, speak as well to the trajectory of this particular CBDO, but even though they're less engaged with the CBDO, a lot of these folks were still engaged in their community. They just might not have been aware of this particular organization. They were a bit more skeptical about the kind of effectiveness of community engagement that was occurring, and really wanted to see more emphasis on narrative work, more political engagement, and more supportive resident-led initiatives, and also emphasize the needs of organizations to support the daily material needs of residents so that they have the space and ability to engage deeply in communities. So thinking about things like childcare, or folks are frankly worried about feeding themselves. It's hard to think about that and also be deeply engaged. So really urging organizations to think about how they can support those sorts of needs. Higher engaged residents. really were able to provide specific rationales again about this link between narrative and systems change, and really seeing that as root cause work. They very much understand and appreciate the wide range of direct services that organizations offer, but really found value in the CBDO's role in changing the narrative of the community so that it reflects more what community members actually experience, actually able to lift up the assets and the skills and just the beauty and the joy that exists within these communities and offset some of those negative dominant narratives. They also recognize the CBDOs are well positioned for systems change and the role they play in providing opportunities for residents to remember that they have power and really supporting them in how and where to exert that power, and also serving as translators for some of this community development jargon. So giving folks the tools that they need to really engage deeper into community development. And they also were really understanding, I think, of some of the challenges that CBDOs face, because they recognize that these organizations also need funding, because they spend a lot of time doing grant writing and seeking funds, where they probably would want to spend more of that time engaging more deeply in the community, recognizing how some of the challenges with resources impact turnover, impact capacity, impact staffing. So they were really understanding, I think, of some of the challenges that these organizations also are undergoing. So some just general recommendations that we have for this research. Like I said, we picked 4 communities, but there's so much more that could be unearthed. So recommending that there's additional research, continuing to use creative methodology. We found that, again, incredibly useful to collaborate and work closely with artists on this, and really just digging deeper into some of this geographic nuances, really digging deeper into within communities. Community is not a monolithic, residents are not a monolith. There's so many different lived experiences, even within a neighborhood. There's generational differences. And just addressing some barriers that exist within communities. For example, and an interesting thing that came up was even in neighborhoods that were not identified as Black, but there was still a colorism issue. Like folks named that, even like for example, the Arab American community, darker skinned folks tend to have more difficulty accessing positions of power, right? So that's something that can continue to get explored. There's just so much to continue to dig into, and really increasing root cause work, like what is really at the core of some of the challenges in these communities. But overall, I think just what really came through was like folks were just really honest about some of the challenges in their community, but the joy and the hope that people felt, experienced, the excitement and eagerness they have to engage with these organizations, to support what they're doing, and also seeing the organization support what they're doing was really huge. So that's just kind of the basis. So out of that, we created a conversation guide that we're going to model for you all today. And this conversation guide was really trying to provide a tool for folks to use to continue to have conversations within their organizations about how to engage residents, for residents to be able to engage in conversation about how they work with organizations, and for funders and intermediaries to also be able to engage in these conversations. It's really this ecosystem of folks supporting each other to really move forward these equitable practices. And it's going to take all the folks in this room who are working on this in a lot of different ways to make this happen. So definitely encourage folks to dig deep on the website, check out the issue brief, check out the data and methodology brief if you want to hear more about the approach and research methodology. And thank you. I will pass it back to my man, Curtis.
Hello again, everyone. Dominique and Frank, thank you so much for lifting up the work. As we transition, we'll enter our panel discussion with our community development experts. That is Kathy Payton, Bethy Brocky, and Tawana Brown. And so just want to begin with a level setting question for all 3 of our panelists to answer. If you would, as community development experts, knowing the depth of this report, the historic, I think, current and future relationship of resident voice in relationship to community development, can you speak to why that is so important? And I'll start with Kathy and then Becky and Tawana.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I'm so excited to see, and let me compliment the work of the literary artists. They really capture the essence of our communities. Speaking to your question, let me just first declare that I have the opportunity of serving a neighborhood where I was born and raised in. And so my experience is a little bit different But I will say that perhaps it's probably the downfall of some of the work that we've done in terms of how we listen to the resident voice. Because even though I'm a native of the community, it doesn't mean that I have to have a careful ear for listening and hearing and making sure that I am not guilty of doing the same thing that others have done, and that's doing things to the people and not doing things for the people. And in Houston, and in particularly the South, I think, we focus so on placement and place-based building and community development from the physical standpoint that all too often it feels like the people are the afterthought because there's no tangible metrics that are there that we can communicate to our funders, the investors, and things that they're comfortable with measuring, like educational attainment, workforce growth, empowerment, wealth building, and asset. Those are things that we don't have clear metrics for that we can communicate and articulate that significance. So in areas like Fifth Ward, unfortunately, when Dominique was talking about the level of engagement of the participants, I feel like my community is probably balanced or unequally balanced between there being more people who are less engaged than there are people who are being engaged. And a lot of that is the result of two things. First of all, I think people don't miss what they don't have. Second of all, so often our voices have been shuttered and people have not listened. So we have survey fatigue, we have planning fatigue, and we're tired of just talking about the issues and not seeing the work actually being done. And so I think we have to be careful and cognizant of the fact that people do know what they want. They do know what it means to have a quality of life. And although the science doesn't necessarily always align with the passion for community, we have to strive and struggle to figure out ways how we balance both the science of what we do with the passion of the people and what they want to see happen. And again, I can tell you, I've been doing this for 30 years now, and our organization is 35 years, and we serve one of Houston's most impoverished neighborhoods. They're disengaged, they're disenfranchised, and we're no longer voting. And so how do we restore that voice is critically important for us. And it means building relationships one at a time.
I'll go next. I'm Becky Brocky, and I live in Big Sky, Montana. We are a small tourist-based economy, and I work for an organization called Big Sky Community Housing Trust, and our main mission is to create affordable housing opportunities for our residents. Since we're a tourist-based economy, without our residents, we really have no community, and without them, it negatively impacts our local economy. For success, community development needs to center around resident needs and voices. My organization works on creating housing in a rural community, which is a microcosm of the nation's widening wealth gap. We have private clubs, 3 different private clubs for billionaires. Well, most of us who actually live here full time are middle-class citizens. So if our organization fails to listen to resident voices, the stakes are quite high for us as we risk losing these residents as community members. And since the unavailability of housing is literally forcing people out of our community. If we fail to listen, we also have substantial financial consequences for our organization, because if our programs miss the marks, we risk losing the investment altogether. We'll have millions of dollars built into housing that people don't actually want to live in if we fail to listen. And we also believe our residents have valuable insights as they work on the ground in our community and experiences. And if we can consider them, this often leads to more creative solutions that may not have been considered in the past. And it also creates more inclusive and equitable outcomes for all of our community members.
Certainly agree with what Becky and Kathy said. I would add that in speaking with the 13 residents that I spoke with in Memphis, had the privilege of talking with, reminded just how often root work happens below the radar. It happens slowly, it happens thoughtfully, lovingly. It often happens without fanfare. People were not necessarily making money for their efforts, but they were doing this from their heart. And they understood because they had a wisdom about their own community. So the root work from the experience that I had with residents is where the most nutrition is, or where much of the nutrition is. It's also an understanding of where the momentum is, who's doing what where. And it just seemed to give blood, breath, bone, and buy-in to the data and to the other sort of larger lenses that a community can benefit from.
Thank you. I so much appreciate your voices. With that, I think a silver lining in all of your responses is there's like a sanctity to residents' voice. And so I am curious to know, and I'll start with Becky, if that be true. The likes of Big Sky, Montana is a very unique place, right? With incredibly unique dynamics and demographics. And so how might you hold that intention as you raise or I say seek out the resident voice?
Gosh, yeah, our town is quite unique. We're really a ski town. We have 3,600 people roughly that live here year round, and that fluctuates to about 10,000 people during the winter with seasonal workers and tourists who come here to ski. A significant advantage to our small size of at least the people who live here year round is that we take a grassroots approach to addressing our most pressing community needs, be it housing or childcare. And we're also an unincorporated community without a traditional city government or a city council. So we're almost forced into a grassroots approach because there's no central organization that we can go to. So we have to band together as a community to address our needs. The very existence of my organization, Big Sky Community Housing Trust, is an example of grassroots efforts formed by listening to concerned resident voices. Basically, after years of hearing repetitive reports from local businesses, our local chamber organized a group of citizens across multiple public and private sectors to formulate a community land trust. This summer, 4 years after becoming a nonprofit, residents will be moving into our second development that's aimed at creating secure and affordable homes exclusively for the people who work and live in this town and make us a community. Although the smaller size of the core community makes collaboration practical, the large volume of seasonal workers, second homeowners, and the high cost of living make it a challenge to hear the voices of everyone in our community. Since 2019, we've seen property values increase 185% in our community. Now the basic condo costs over $1 million and single family homes cost over $2 million, but the median income in the area is only about $60,000. It's becoming more challenging to hear from people who are not yet homeowners and without secure housing, whether they live here year round or seasonally, because of how many hours they have to work just to meet their basic necessities. So working multiple jobs makes it impossible for them to serve on boards in the community or to volunteer with nonprofits in the community. But for us, the even bigger tragedy is that we're starting to lose these community members, which is evident by the dropping in enrollment in our school. The combination of high housing costs and an imbalance between supply and demand has forced people out as they eventually grow tired of facing homelessness at the end of every lease cycle because we have a 0% rental vacancy in our long-term rental market and no real emergency housing. So if people lose their lease, they either leave in their car or they have to leave.
Thank you, Becky, for that response. I'll segue to Kathy. In learning more about Fifth Ward Redevelopment Corporation, I stumbled upon Monument Build's memory documentary. And I think internally just felt like this deep appreciation for amplifying the voices of residents, memorializing, I think, the heartbeat of those who were, are, and will be. And so if you would, please touch a little bit on that.
So thank you, Curtis. So Memory Builds the Monument was a film that we did. And I will tell you, the Fifth Ward community, so that you can put this in context, We serve about 24,000 residents proper, with 32% of them living below the poverty line. 20% of our households manage transportation without a vehicle. We have health disparities. We have deteriorating housing and a lack of affordable housing. Our community has been plagued as a cancer cluster. The educational attainment and graduation rate is about 75%. And then there are the issues of the dual branding, where our community is seen as both a positive and a negative, underserved versus high opportunity. And so to put that all in context, we have used arts and culture as a means to respond to some of the issues that our community faces, particularly as it relates to gentrification, displacements, loss of cultural history, loss of heritage. And Memory Builds the Monument does that. It tells the story of the significant role we as African Americans in Houston's Fifth Ward, among one of the most impoverished neighborhoods in Houston today, the impact and the influence that we had on not just the growing economy of Houston at that time, but the growing economy of the South. And so we were the place to be. And so people talked about and came to Fifth Ward. And some of you may have heard the name Fifth Ward because it's been featured in the Green Book and those type of stories, because there were destinations here that would draw people to our community. And so when you think about how we use art and people feel like they're being displaced and their stories are not being told, it means a whole lot for the community to be able to increase their level of spirit and their pride for their community through the untold stories. And so we often tell our newcomers and residents that you came into an existing community, the community did not come to you. And so it's particularly important that we have a voice and we're able to tell our story, preserve the rich history and legacy that we have here in Fifth Ward, and do it through a culturally sensitive way. I mean, I can tell you, and I've shared that I'm a native of the community. It means a whole lot for me as a native of this community. I'm a New Year's baby. I was born in the hospital right here in the Fifth Ward, but that was designated as the place where African Americans in Houston could have their babies there. My mother was a nurse there, and now our organization now owns the hospital and adaptively repurposing that into affordable housing. Those types of events really capture the essence of what these types of cultural landmarks mean for our community. I can build 5,000 single family houses, but it wasn't until we started the preservation of that hospital and the Deluxe Theater and all of the other historic landmarks that the community really felt like the work that we were doing was for the community, because that was their story. Those were the things that meant a lot to them, and how we preserve that rich history and be able to share it with the next generation are critically important. And I'll add, Curtis, we were nominated for the 53rd NAACP Image Award for that documentary, Memory Builds the Monument. So check it out.
I appreciate that insight, Kathy. And I would also encourage you, having seen the documentary, to watch it beyond our webinar here today. I'm going to close with this question. So Tawana, you were a part of this work. You had the opportunity to go out into Memphis and to sit with folks and better understand residents' voice. I think I am most intrigued, not only what you learned, but how the interviews, or the people rather, changed you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so first of all, I took on that work as almost sacred, because people not only shared their stories, but they shared their dreams. And that is a very powerful opportunity. I was also reminded that every day Memphis is bombarded with news that tells us who the city is, and it's oftentimes not very favorable. And we hold certain titles that again, don't necessarily shed positively on the city. But in speaking with the 13 residents, it was so clear to me that I was talking to people who love Memphis, who understand the challenges, but also see the beauty of it and hold dreams in the beauty, and not just hold dreams, but are working towards dreams to lift this city and to really honor who this city is as its core. And that was a really powerful experience.
Thank you so much. With that, it brings our community development experts panels to a close. I want to thank you so much, Kathy, Becky, and Tawana, for lending us your voices. And I know this has resonated with our participants. At this time, I will pass the baton to Tawana Brown, who will be leading us in a literary artist activity. And so you are now on. Thank you, Tawana.
All right. Thank you, Curtis. So for the next 5 minutes, I know there's a possibility of music coming on and an image coming, but irrespective if that happens or not, for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to ask you to join me in doing what Robin Kelley calls freedom dreaming. I'm actually going to turn off my camera if that's okay, because I really struggle watching myself as I talk. So I'm going to explain to you what I'm going to invite you to do for the next 5 minutes, and then we'll do it, and then we'll wrap up. So again, I want to invite you to freedom dream, because Robin Kelley talks about how freedom dreaming or dreaming is, or having the ability to imagine, is one of our most sacred gifts. So I'm going to invite you to go to a place that you love or that you could love. I'm going to ask you to walk through that place, knowing that you're safe. I'm going to ask you to see something that could be. And I'm going to give you an example. I know Miss Kathy Temple is going to come on here in a little bit and share with you about CTC with Justin and others. There was so much love for her in the conversations I had with individuals, and they talked about some of what she has been freedom dreaming in terms of building gardens in places where grocery stores don't exist, right? So I want you to go to this place and imagine what could be particularly beautiful and empowering for this community. I want you to write it in the chat, but don't push send. And we'll write out when I share, ask you to share, we'll all push send together. And then there'll be a kind of waterfall of dream experiences, because there's power in sharing our dreams and collectively holding those. And then we'll do a brief gallery walk through the experience so you can just see what are some of the dreams that people hold. For instance, I'll share with you here in Memphis, a historic high school was recently transformed into a state-of-the-art library that will have housing for senior citizens on the top floors. Before that happened, someone had to dream that, see that, and hold it and work towards it. So I'm going to ask you to do that for the community that you love. And once we do a gallery walk, the last thing we'll do is send up a word of hope and inspiration and celebration for our dream. Okay, so with that in mind, I'm just going to ask us that you take a deep breath. You can either close your eyes or look at the screen, whatever you feel most comfortable doing. And I'm going to ask that you pick a place you love or could love, because sometimes love takes a minute, right? Then I'm going to ask that you go there and that you get comfortable, both in your chair and in the place you're visiting, knowing that you're not alone, you're safe, and something greater than yourself walks with you. There's a basket at your feet. I want you to see that basket. And I ask that you put anything that is heavy and hard in that basket. You'll be able to pick it up before you leave the space if you need to. And in the place, I'm going to ask that you allow yourself a full sensory experience. What do you see? Who do you see? What do you hear? I'm going to ask that you walk through that space, and I'm going to be quiet for the next 30 or 60 seconds or so. And I'm going to ask that you imagine that you gather a hope or a dream for that space, and let it be as radical as you can carry. And after about 30 seconds or so of that, I'm going to ask that you write in a brief statement that dream in the chat. But again, don't push send. So for the next 30 seconds, please walk through your space. I'll let you know when to put that in the chat, but don't push send, and then we'll push send together. I hope that's clear, and I hope that you have a really great walk. All right, you can begin. take a few more moments to gather your dream. And if you could, begin to put it in the chat, but again, don't push send, just put it in the chat. And after we give people a few moments to put their wish in the chat, or their dream, or their vision, I'll ask you to share. Just a few more moments. Okay, now if everyone would share, hopefully we'll have a cascade of dreams in the chat. And as people share, I invite you to just peruse through, do a virtual gallery walk of the dreams that people are holding. What is resonating for you? You to peruse through this, knowing that as we look at people's dreams, we are also touching what is sacred, because it's from a place of creativity and imagination. And the last thing I would ask you to do is select one word, just one word that for you holds hope and celebration. And I would ask that you put that word in the chat, and that is the word that we will offer these dreams as a gift. And as the words populate, and as we prepare to come back as a group, I thank you for joining me in this experience. And I hope that these words inspire you throughout your day. And may our visions manifest in ways that not only nourish us, but our communities and the people we love. Thank you so much. And I will turn this back over to Curtis. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that a great deal. Tawana had high expectations, and that far exceeded them. And so we are grateful for your gift. We have been persevering now for a whole 45 minutes. And yeah, that's a great opportunity to take a quick break. And so looking at the time, it is 12:44 p.m. Let's reconvene at 12:50 p.m. And then we will go into our next panel led by Dominique Miller. See you all in a few moments. 12:50 p.m.
Why'd you have to leave? Why'd you have to go? Tell me that I meant something to you. Oh, I can't do this anymore. 2, 3, 4. So sweet. I give you kisses in the backseat. I whisper secrets in the backbeat. You make me cry, you make me happy, happy. Be my lipstick on a cigarette. Just toss it and you stomp it out, out, out. Inhaling whiskey when you kiss my neck. We've been hurting, but it's happy hour. Oh, oh. They couldn't have me, and they never will. And sometimes I hold you closer just to know you're real. The wheels in the gravel, Davis in my bones. Sometimes I take the day off just to turn you on. Honey, honey, I could be your bodyguard. Oh, honey, honey, I could be your Kevlar. Oh, honey, honey, I could be your lifeguard. Ooh, honey, honey, you should let me ride shotgun, shotgun. Oh, be your best friend. I'll protect you in the mosh pit, and I'll defend you in the gossip. You know how people like to start shit and pop shit. I don't like the way she's looking at you. Someone better hold me back. Oh, charging 10 for a double and I'm talking. I'm about to lose it. Turn around and John Wayne that ass. They couldn't catch you, and they never will. You see, sometimes I hold you closer just to know you're real. Tell me your problems, I'll take how you feel. I'll show you an exit when you're restless. I'll take the wheel. Oh, honey, honey, you could be my bodyguard. Oh, honey, honey, will you let me ride shotgun, shotgun? Oh.
Hey, hey, welcome back. Hope everyone had a nice break. Thank you, Tawana, again for that lovely exercise. Hope folks are feeling grounded. I'm excited to bring to the stage Justin, Kathy, and Chastity from Memphis, Tennessee, representing Center for Transforming Communities. As I mentioned, we're going to model the conversation guide and just engage in dialogue around how Center for Transforming Communities is engaging residents and hear from Chastity as a resident. So definitely looking forward to this one. I have to say I'm constantly impressed with your work, Justin, and just how committed you are to residents. You know, every time we engage CTC and we say we want to talk to a number of residents and can we bring more? How many more can we get? Can we bring some? I always want to bring more folks to the table. And I love it. And sometimes our parameters, if we can't do it, we're always looking for future opportunities to bring in more folks. So sometimes it's not right now. It's not a no, but it's like not this time, but we'll get y'all next time. So again, excited to have y'all here today. And we'll just start off with a question for you, Justin. Could you talk a little bit about what practices you have in place for engaging residents in a substantial, really long-term type of way?
Yeah, good morning. It feels good to be in the space. So yeah, we Center for Transforming Communities. We say we do relational organizing, and it is a part of long-term base building, power building, capacity building. And what that looks like is that all of our connectors, that they organizers, field organizers, connectors, folks that are working to bring together the community ecosystem. So churches, Parks and Rec, but in particular, residents and what it means to center resident voice. And they do a certain amount of one-on-ones a week, around 17 to 20. And over time, that builds out what we call our qualitative data bank, which is really just, the experiences that the connectors have and trying to actually create pivots in the community that build solidarity. Yeah.
Kathy, wondering if you have any thoughts to add as a community connector, president, like you're kind of in, I think, in all the different buckets here. Just curious if there's anything you would add to that.
Sorry about that. Thanks, Dominique. And good afternoon, everybody. I do wear all the hats. I'm a resident. I work for a nonprofit, and I am the ED of a resident-led nonprofit, all in the same community in North Memphis and Douglas. So this is one of our biggest issues in communities of color, is that so many of us have to wear so many hats. And it's difficult sometimes, but that is the purpose of the work that we're doing, a big part of the purpose of the work, because this load has to be shared, because the poverty is shared, the poor mentality is shared, the lack of resources is shared. So we must all share in the burden of the work of making our communities safe and viable and self-sustainable. So I'm proud and glad to wear all the hats.
Thanks, Kathy. Thanks for introducing yourself and all my excitement. I forgot to ask y'all to do a little intro. Chastity, would love to hear you kind of chime in there, because you also are a resident, but you also, have a business and wear some hats as well. So I'd love to hear just an intro from you, and also just hear a little bit about your understanding of CTC's priorities and offerings, and if you feel like you have a good sense of what those are.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Chastity Harris. I'm here for the representation of Center for Transforming Communities, as well as the Time Is Now in Douglas, as well as 5 Senses Farming, Agriculture, and Culinary Arts, which is my own farming and culinary arts program that I have in the Douglas community. I'm in Covington right now at school, because I was about to say here in Memphis, but but back home in Memphis, it was a program that I launched, honestly, back in 2015 when I first graduated from culinary arts. I just had the name. I just had the name for the program, no vision. I wanted it to be a restaurant, but then I wanted more. Not saying that I couldn't put the restaurant in my community, but what would be the point of me creating or developing a restaurant and my neighbors can't afford it? So I had a vision, for my community to enjoy. So years went on down the line, graduated from Lacole in 2015. And I want to say around 2017, 2018, I was introduced to Miss Kathy Temple with The Time Is Now in Douglas. I came to her with all of my ideas and things like that. I'm super excited. I'm young. I'm one of the youngest ones. And she's just like, hold on. She's like, keep all of this in mind. It's coming. So I stayed patient, 2018, and then 2019, 2020. That's when I was introduced to Justin Merrick with the Center for Transforming Communities and the North Memphis Voice Project. We started working on that, diligently, just getting ideas of what the community wants. What do we see in our community, not just in Douglas, but in North Memphis alone. So that project in itself broadened my eyes because I was being a little selfish when it came down to community development, because I was only thinking about Douglas and not realizing that Douglas is not Memphis and Memphis is not Douglas. And what we see in the economy today is not just a community issue, it's a worldwide issue, it's a human based issue. So me being the resident that I am and coming from a community where, like Miss Kathy said, we're low impoverished, we have a lack of resources, and just wanting to sit down and see what type of plan or what program could we introduce to Memphis or to the world in general and change people, change people's mindset of what they see. And going back to the image where it says invest in the ghettos or something like that. One thing that I've realized when it comes to the ghetto, we want, and I say we because I still live in the Douglas community, we want what middle class residents want. We want what rich class residents want. We want the same thing. We want grocery stores right across the street. We want walking distance grocery stores. We want a yoga center. We like coffee too. We don't have access to these things. So being that resident that likes these things, and I don't want to have to travel far to enjoy these things. There's once upon a time being out in the Douglas community where I had to catch the bus, to work, and a job that is 20 minutes away, I have to get up, 2.5 hours just to make a 3-trip bus ride. And I'm not the only person that's going through this. There is a whole community going through this. So being able to put that action plan together with Justin and Miss Kathy and come with all of these issues and saying, how are we going to do this? How can we put this together? How can we make, Chastity's voice, as like a resident myself, ripple out into the community, where they can trust people like Justin and because that's another issue too, lack of trust when it comes to programs or nonprofits like Justin and communities and residents like myself, because you have these nonprofits that come into these communities and they make all these different promises. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, and then the next biggest project in a better developing community comes along, they snatch that from us and they take it elsewhere. So yeah, just being able to do all of that and working with Miss Kathy in the Tanner Street Community Garden. We've collaborated programs. We've collaborated the Tanner Street Community Garden with Five Senses Farming, Agriculture, and Culinary Arts. I do student engagement classes out there. We just recently had Toddler Tuesday last week in the community garden, where we had the toddlers of the Douglas community come out and pick strawberries, which was an amazing, amazing class. The kids enjoyed it. And the second part to that class is I'll have my senior students, which is the age group of 8 to 18. We'll meet up at the Douglas Community Center in their kitchen and we'll make strawberry shortcake. So it's things like that, that's small, but it's really big. And it takes just one idea or one heart of passion to ripple off into the flow of the community. And when we look at it like that, and when we go out into these residents and they have ideas, we have to make them feel that their ideas matter. Make me feel that my idea matters. Make me feel that my idea can change the world, because that's all I need. I call it the pass the torch method. Justin, he passed the torch to me. He was like, Chastity, you got it. You got this torch. Now I take this torch and I pass it on. I pass it on to my students. Example, I pass it on to my students. And now when you pass that torch on to a younger generation, a stronger generation, a more, inclusive generation. And it just goes on to where now you're not just changing the community, you're not just changing the residents' minds, you are now changing the world. And that's me. I'm a world takeover. That's my idea. I'm gonna take over the world. So that, you know, how do we continue this on?
That's great, Chastity. Thank you. Oh, you just so many thoughts. I think the
I'm
great
sorry,
things about
I have that effect, y'all. I can feed it.
no, but you made so many connections, and I think what's great about working with you all is like sometimes I think we talk about organizations or residents, and these things like they're separate things, and that's not the case. And I think it's so interconnected. I think you just really named that really, really well. And same as Kathy and Justin as well. So would love to hear, especially one, Justin, if you didn't introduce yourself, please would do so. But would just love to hear about how y'all are thinking about the type of supports that you can provide to residents like Chastity and other folks beyond direct service to make sure they're able to continue to engage in your work in ways that they want to, in ways that you would want to see them.
I'll just lean in really quickly and say, yeah, Justin Mayer, Center for Transforming Communities. And no, I did the introduction. At the very core of it, and what I always tell folks that I think is a missing piece within nonprofit. Someone said to me yesterday, like, you know what? He was like, yo, there's a difference between, you know, having my ear and having a pulse on the community and having a pulse on the streets. And I think that, you know, our goal, right, is how do we create generative relationships that allow for folks to be actualized, and understanding that that has to happen at multiple tiers, right? And so when Kathy came on board to Center for Transforming Communities, having had a nonprofit, and I, you know, she says this all the time, so this may steal some of her thunder, but you know, we are pioneering a way to figure out what that looks like. And what I'm talking about is like how we share power. Like that's the conversation that we don't have. That's the conversation that's outside of direct services often, right? So direct services is the immediate solutions, right? It's the Band-Aid often, but it's not necessarily the root of the challenge, right? Everybody's heard of the stream and the babies, you know, coming from upstream, downstream. The direct service is us getting, you know, throwing a raft out and rescuing that baby, but it's not figuring out what's the root of the problem. And how do we help to provide space where the community can dive into those longer systemic types of challenges has been what we endeavor to do at CTC, which means helping to meet the immediate needs where we can, you know, with resources to help extend so that we can have a more dynamic conversation.
Anything you would add there, Kathy, and love to hear from you too about how y'all are thinking about, like you have your nonprofit, Chastity has her business, like what y'all do as residents to continue to support. I think it was just the same CTT is trying to do, and vice versa, because you're also in the CTC had as well. How are you kind of like seeing these efforts come together in Douglas and North Memphis overall?
Thanks, Dominique. I think that I'm sorry, it's multiple things going on right now. And just like I wear many hats, we've got some sawmill updates happening right now that we need to talk about. But I think the story of the time is now, CTC and Chastity, Five Senses, is actually a blueprint for how things should go. When you have a nonprofit working in the community like Center for Transforming Communities, first of all, and I'll make this as succinct as possible, Justin found me on the bus. Okay, I boat-farted my way on to a tour that was taking a tour in North Memphis, but wasn't stopping in Douglas. And I'm like, what the heck? How they gonna have a tour of North Memphis and don't stop in the historic Douglas community? So I invited myself onto the bus, okay? And when they made clear that they would not be stopping in Douglas, Justin, I had never met before, but he was on the bus. I made them folks stop. And I gave them the history of Douglas. I'm saying that to say that we have to not just change the narrative, we have to be the narrative. I wear my community on my chest like a breastplate. When people see me coming, they might not know my name, but they will say, there go Douglas. There go Miss Douglas right there. Here she comes. Because everything that I do represents my people. It has nothing to do with me. I am just the vessel through which it flows. And so the time is now Douglas Redevelopment Corporation, which is a resident-led nonprofit that operates in Douglas. We started off as a neighborhood association, I want to say in 2011. Me and my childhood partner, Robert Perry, we grew up together. We went from kindergarten all through our lives. Our grandparents, our great-grandparents, all of our families are generational and just in Douglas. And that's the beauty of a lot of these small neighborhoods, is that we've known each other for generations. Now we have to put that knowing into action. And so Justin had the blueprint. When he met me, he was like, that is the type of person. Those are the folks that we need for connectors who live in the community that need the help. So Justin's great grand idea, he had the blueprint on hiring folks who are already doing the work in the community. Prior to CTC, I just did what I felt was necessary and what I heard the community. I've lived here all my life. I was an Army grad and then an Army wife, so I've traveled a lot, but Memphis is home. And so Douglas, you know, we're I tell people all the time, I'm just a resident. We started by picking up paper because we were tired of looking at trash on the street. So me and Bobby went out one day, way back in 2010, and let's clean up Ash Street in front of the community center because the kids are out there. So let's just start picking up paper. Next thing you know, the neighbors on Ash Street, they were like, what are y'all doing out there? Oh, we're just picking up paper. What started off as 2 people quickly multiplied to 4. Within less than a year's time, it multiplied to 10. And we had a volunteer cleanup crew and started having community cleanups. That's how we started 14 years ago, picking up pieces of paper, litter off the ground. Now, with the support of organizations like CTC, and because I work for Center for Transforming Communities, my resident-led organization has been able to grow exponentially because of the connection that we have and our shared mission and vision of revitalizing, restoring, and rehabbing our people and community. Not just buildings, not just parks, not just businesses, but it's all about the people and the residents. And that's where folks like Chastity steps in. We're going along, cleaning up trash and picking up stuff. And next thing you know, the pandemic hits. And so we felt, well, let's apply for a 501c3. We don't know what that's going to do. We're all learning as we go along. Then I start working for CTC. Then Justin starts pouring all these possibilities and narrative changes and crystal stairs and glass ceiling models and how to connect with people and connecting on a more relational way rather than transactional, and dealing with people on a very deep rooted level rather than a surface level, which is what we see with a lot of these surveys that we fill out and these non-profits that come into our communities and say, hey, we want to do something for some poor Black folk. We don't need any handouts. All of us who are Black know how we feel about handouts. We don't need your handouts, honey. We just need a level playing field. That is all we can do for ourselves. So our vision together, we have been able to get back on the road of self-sustainability and self-resilience and self-reliance, Because back in my day, and we ain't gonna say when that day was, but it was long before y'all's day, okay? Back in my day, Douglas, North Memphis, we've never had a grocery store, ever. And so I'm not sure, well, I'm sure, I just try not to. Grocery store seems to be the answer to our food desert problem, but it never was. Ain't nobody in my community never been skinny or missed any meals. We're all quite healthy. And we didn't get there through a grocery store. We own food. We had the market man that had a local farm who would bring in fresh produce, fresh local meat. We knew where our food came from. Now, 80's gone, mass capitalization, mass profiteering. We've got grocery store chains like we've never seen before. And now we all depend on grocery stores if that's where food comes from. And that is not where food comes from. So here in Douglas, who has always been a farming community, and just real briefly, Douglas is exactly 40 acres. It was owned by a slave owner, and after the Emancipation Proclamation was given to a family who still resides in Douglas. It's exactly 40 acres, and that mule was given for taxes. Douglas was named after Frederick Douglass, and it is a farming town. Everybody are descendants of slaves and sharecroppers. We can trace our own histories. We don't need Ancestry.com because we've stayed right there. We've stayed right there all this time. And so there's no reason why our community should not be self-reliant or self-sufficient, except for the things that came in and divided us. But those are artificial things. And we have to get back to what's natural, which is community. The two words that make up community are commune and unity. As Black people with origins from Africa, it is natural for us to gather and commune and live together and help each other to live. We've bought into the idea of the individualism of capitalism, and that is against our nature. And that is the discord that we're experiencing in our communities now. But that's a drill down. We had to get to that understanding and understand that our problem is not with each other. Our problem is not even with another race. Our problem is that we've rejected our natural ways and inserted what's artificial. And we just have to get back to what's natural. What we feel is natural, which is a connection to each other and to the earth and to the air and to the water and to the soil. So the gardening is so much more than gardening. It's about communing together and revitalizing a community. It's about bringing all the people back together for the common purpose of simply living. We all need to eat. We all need to drink water. We all need to breathe. We can grow our own food. We can make sure our aquifers stay free of pollution, which is some of the equity justice work that we did. So the garden, I'm saying all that to say that the garden is so much more bigger than just growing food. It represents the soil that we walk on, that we plant seeds in, that we must grow strong trees and strong roots so that we can have strong, safe, reliable, self-sustained community. So out of the garden work, we do equity justice work. Out of the garden work, what we do, we partner with other organizations like the Mid-South Food Bank. And while we're growing these foods, we give away food every month for the last 4 years in partnership with the Mid-South Food Bank. The goal is that we won't need Mid-South Food Bank because we'll be growing our own food where we're completely self-sustained. Also out of that, our soil. We're surrounded by factories in Douglas. Surrounded by them. Our soil is not good. So part of our work has to do with the soil and tackling those problems on why our soil is no longer viable, and we have to do our gardens above ground. We find the perpetrators and we go after them and look for some type of remediation and relief from the damage that they've caused in our communities. It's so much more to it, but it's so life-giving and revitalizing. to be a part of the work and actually see change being effectuated in your community, and can look at a young person like Chastity, who came out of high school with no plans, went on to become a chef at the Peabody Deli. Y'all better recognize who's sitting before you. Now she's got 5 senses. She is using our gardens as a living classroom to teach children about growing food, where food comes from, not just children, adults, and then she will cook the stuff up we grew into a healthy meal we can eat. That is what communing and unity is all about, is self-sustainability and sustaining each other.
Thank you so much, Kathy. You touched on so many things, and I love how you basically explain how like one program that can seem, someone just reads the title, they think it's just one simple thing, but just all the tentacles and just like the historical context, like it's so much bigger than it can sound like from the outside looking in. That's really important. And sometimes that part can be hard to measure, hard to explain to folks to support the work. I saw your hand raised, Justin. If you still got a thing, I'm gonna let you share a thing. We've got maybe 5 minutes, and then we're gonna jump to some questions within that 5 minutes. So if you got a quick thing, go on and do your quick thing, and then we'll jump to some questions.
Yeah, it's quick. So you can see there's abundance, right? And I have to say that when we talk about the equity piece, really, it's that folks just need the opportunity and platform to do what they're already doing. I want to continue to look, because that's the relationship, right? I would love for folks to kind of walk away with 2 takeaways. When we think about systems, right, there's levels to the systems. So on the top tier, there's the policy work, right, that has to happen. Then underneath, like the advocacy work that gets us there, which a lot of times advocacy is not centered in communities. It's folks coming in and advocate for communities when communities can advocate for themselves. So how do you set up that structure, which I hope you were seeing that you see that. Underneath advocacy, it's organizing, which is like, yo, how are we doing power building work that helps to equip folks with the tool bank and the skills to be able to show up, so that when Kathy's talking about Douglas being surrounded by factories and folks that have polluted the soil, right, that we have a series of tools that gets us to the community benefits agreements, right, that where the community actually does these things on their own, which is part of what they're organizing now. It's been a 50-year journey in which every 10 years it's renewed, and right, and they continue to deepen it and get even better results towards the self-sustainability. And the thing that I would love for folks to hear on the organizing is like neighborhoods, because a lot of times organizing is done through issues when we think about like community development. And what we really have done is like place-based, which means it's the folks that experience all of the different issues, right? How do we cross-cut those issues? And under that, I would want folks to hear and really analyze, is your program resident-centered? Right, which is most programs, right? Is it resident led, which you've heard Ms. Temple talk a lot about, Kathy, or is it resident controlled? And that's what we've actually been trying to move, towards this spectrum, is where it's resident controlled. I think that distinction within the community development sector, when we talk about anti-racist community development, that goes all the way back to Martin Luther King, 1967. Where do we go from here? Where he actually said resources and stuff, how do we support that type of infrastructure? And the last thing that I will share is the triangle, right, that we do in terms of base building, like narrative shift. That's the qualitative data that supports the numbers, right? And then shifting it to some type of material change and campaign, that those 3 things are constantly working together. And we find cultural ways like Douglas's Juneteenth, which Kathy's family started, which was the first, Juneteenth festival here in the city of Memphis, to lift up those things so that it's always fortified by a cultural lens. So we're doing a lot, but it's very generative and connected to one another and how we show up.
Thank you so much. I think you touched on some of the points that are in a couple of the questions, and so much of what you said resonates again with the research that we've done. What you said, Kathy, about not looking for handouts, like I think that was across the board. Like folks are like, we're not asking for you to just give us a thing. Like we know what we need. We have the things. We just need that level playing field, like you said, we can just go. Something else too is about I think you were touching on organizing, and something that has come up too is that it's difficult to find funding. It can be difficult to find funding for organizing and for engagement. Community development has moved, I think, kind of away from what it started off as. this movement, civil rights movement, Black Power movement, residents, community members advocating for their neighborhoods, into this industry where it's a lot about units and housing and capital gains and that sort of stuff. And it can be difficult to find funding for these other really critical pieces. So some folks are asking about ideas on measuring social impact of community engagement, particularly because I'm sure, when you're looking for funding, they're looking for metrics. So like if you have any kind of specific ways that you all use to measure social impact of the engagement that you do, and just also the difficulty I think they've named of turnover around organizations, because pay is low, but the need for organizing is high and training is difficult to come by. So just would love to hear anything you have about how you're measuring impact.
I'll just share this real quick, and folks can dive in. We developed something called Measuring Love. It's a brown paper. You can look it up, and we continue to evolve that. So all the logs and stuff that I was talking about around the qualitative data, it's a system that we have helped to support, that we are pioneering now as a way of providing context to the qualitative data. Like, we know if the neighborhood's a poor neighborhood, we get it. We understand the stats, we understand the quality of life, but how do we make sure that that has context in interpreting that? And so it's much more comprehensive, but it's essentially a qualitative database that allows for us to support building out and more transformative policies. Like, that's the goal, right? Is that this qualitative data is a repository that we're collecting of stories. Think about at the end of a year, where we then have in one neighborhood 300 stories, right, around environment, that we can then attach that to the company that has polluted the soil, right, as a way of being able to measure, right, through how many times experiences come up, the relationships, how thick those relationships are in terms of connectivity. And we believe that that is the missing component, because so often the stories of Black communities, especially when we're talking about development, are not fully told. They're not comprehensively told. There's so many things that are missing. And the other part that I'll just connect is that Kathy's been, we are co-producing the Juneteenth Festival together. And I said, I don't know if we should do Measuring Love. And she says, no, that's it. This is me acknowledging that we probably should lean forward, since it's coming up with the title of Measuring Love. But that's how then it shows up, right, as a product, is that the whole event is going to be produced around those stories and those themes. And more on that, right, that we'll be producing in terms of what we're calling our gratitude report, not an impact. Got it from Burns Institute, but our gratitude report that shows how we're quantifying and qualifying that work.
Thank you so much, Justin. And thanks, Kathy and Chastity, for joining us today for this panel. I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Frank for the next panel for our intermediaries. But again, thank y'all so much.
Thank you, Dominique. Hi, everybody. Good to see you again. I'm going to bring forward Leatrice Moore, if we could, from the Black Community Developers Group, as well as Erica Gee with National Capacity. As we bring them forward, we're going to ask Leatrice and Erica to please introduce themselves when we get here. As they come forward, if I could ask Chance on the text team to pull up the Storied Communities Community Stories discussion guide. As part of this project, in their infinite wisdom, our partners at Third Space, what they did for us is that they not only went out and gathered the stories. If you could zoom out, Chance, to the whole discussion guide, that'd be great. They not only went out and connected the stories, did the interviews, and created a report, all of which is necessary and very useful. But they also thought, hey, isn't there a way we could also make this used? And so they created a discussion guide for the project that we are modeling for you here. And as you see in the kind of upper left part of the discussion guide, you see some sample questions that you can take to your communities to have the types of conversations we're modeling in this webinar. If you are a resident in the community, in the upper right, it would be if you're a community organization wanting to talk with your residents and partners locally about how your organization can be better stewards of the community voice and speak not for but with the voices of the community. There are some sample questions for you there to get discussion started. And then, of course, what we're going to be doing here right now is in the lower part of the discussion guide. It it is necessary but inadequate for only community organizations and residents to be talking about how important residents are to, and essential the residents are to being community development. There are lots of entities that can produce affordable housing, not just nonprofits. There are lots of entities that can provide social services, not just community development organizations. But the third-legged stool of this work is the connection of our field to the communities that we serve. And having that conversation at what we generally call the intermediary level was really important to our friends at the Kresge Foundation who supported this work. It's important to the Community Opportunity Alliance, and it's important to Leatrice and Erica. So we're going to sample a little bit of a conversation with you. If I could, Leatrice, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Good afternoon or morning, wherever you are. My name is Leatrice Williams Moore. I am the Executive Director of the Black Community Developers Group. We're a national coalition founded in 2020 of a collective force of over 40 Black-led community development and housing organizations. And we are committed to addressing the lack of historic reparative investments in Black communities in rural and urban spaces. It's always important for me to emphasize that we are national, although many people get it confused because I'm housed in Los Angeles, but we are national. At the core of our mission is advocacy and equity in lending and grant funding, empowering Black leaders through capacity building, mentorship, and fostering networks that amplifies our collective strength. We believe that power is in numbers and that there's even more power for positive change in collaboration. So really excited and grateful to be a part of this discussion today. And thank you for having me.
Thank you, Erica.
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica G. with National Capacity, which stands for National Coalition for Asian Pacific American Community Development, or National Capacity. We are the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander version of the Black Community Developers Group. And we do federal advocacy for the members working in our neighborhoods, as well as a number of programs that connect them together so they can learn about each other's work and be able to be supported.
Welcome.
And my position is Associate Director of Community and Cultural Resilience, and I have a particular interest in creative placemaking, and so using arts and culture and storytelling strategies as part of comprehensive community development for our neighborhoods, and specifically with like a cultural lens. So, trying to come up with strategies to engage residents that make sense in their community. So like seniors in Chinatown may not go to a beer garden, but they may go to, Tai Chi. So trying to find something that is culturally relevant for them.
Well, welcome to you both. Welcome both. So you both of you mentioned in the context of your organizations having members. So as either individual members and or organizational members. So in a sense, kind of one way to think about your organizations that you are intermediaries, providing grants and financial resources, as well as time, research, sweat and tears. So can you talk a little bit about how your organization helps your members prioritize community voices and the unique needs of communities? And maybe I'll start with Erica.
Yeah, it is hard work, and I really love those Memphis examples of a community getting involved. Oftentimes it is connecting members so that they know that they're not the only ones doing things, and that the strategies that they are trying to do, might look different in their community. And when I was at San Francisco Chinatown, at Chinatown Community Development Center, we had a lot of open space projects. And oftentimes the city planners would say, like, what do you want to see here? And they're like, we want it to just be like it is, but better, and that, that does tell us a lot, but we're wondering, are we asking the right questions? And so we asked, instead, we reframed it. What does your daily life look like? And what is important for you in your daily life? And so like we did some mapping. It's like, okay, the grocery stores are really important. Going to the doctor is really important. Hanging out in the park with their friends is really important. So you can see the elements that are important in the neighborhood. And then that's when we said, okay, and that's the areas that the park needs to improve. But it's sort of this reframing of the question so that the residents could, say what, could tell what's important to them. Because I mean, like most of them haven't been outside of the neighborhood, so they don't know. It's like, oh, like we could get this like fancy playground equipment, but that's not relevant to their own lives. And so we're honoring their lives and trying to improve their lives.
Leatrice?
Yes, for us, in terms of supporting our members, it's more so of reassurance and reinforcement of the work that they're already doing. I will say that our members are very clear that their work has to be community and trust-based led, and they do a really good job in doing so. I will also say that what's very unique about our members and the work that they do is that regardless to where they are located throughout the nation, communities mirror each other, right? And the problems mirror each other. So the solution definitely in communicating and having an inclusive process with members' voices always being heard is something that we just continue to foster and encourage. Our members certainly benefit from our collective membership because of our resources and opportunities and networking and partnerships that we have with other people that they may not have particularly had if we weren't a national organization. So I think they leverage those resources and continue to support the community and their voices and uplift them in the ways and really listening to what their members need versus what they think that members may want or community members may want.
Great. So you both have some time in the field. Eric and I, for example, have known each other for like a decade or so. Maybe. But you have experience, and you have experience not only with our organizations, the three of us, but also other intermediaries in the field. And either speaking in what you see from them or from ourselves, from your own organizations, are there ways that they can strengthen capacity building programs, processes that they have to meaningfully help community development organizations better engage residents and serve with and for residents?
Well, I'll speak for BCDG in particular, and we really focus more on capacity building and mentoring, right? Because we deal with more so supporting the leaders of the organization so that they can be better and take a holistic approach in addressing the community that they serve. So certainly through capacity building workshops and mentorship and making sure that they are provided with the support and assistance that they need to be successful. Also encouraging them and their team to always be culturally sensitive and competent, especially working with the communities that we uniquely serve. Again, because we are Black community developers, typically our leaders look like the community that they serve. So we don't often have that problem from the top position, but sometimes it trickles down with their staff and just being mindful of that and always creating those trust-based relationships with their residents. So for us, we provide more so capacity building and mentorship for our leaders to support those in the community and residents.
And we also do capacity building, and I guess it's mentorship, but it's like more peer-led mentorship. So we believe like in our network that the strongest people and most educated people are the people who are on the ground doing the work. And the network provides an opportunity to help connect people if they do not know each other. And then with our capacity building, a lot of times, we try to do workshops, convention, in the neighborhoods that our community organizations are working in. So, for example, if you are in Seattle, we will be hosted by the Seattle Chinatown International District, PDA, to understand their Chinatown and see what's working and what's not working. And, and then also think about they're going through a huge transportation issue where whether or not the transportation hub will be a station centered in Chinatown ID or slightly apart from it. But there are many communities like San Francisco, Chinatown, Little Tokyo in Los Angeles that also have, transit oriented projects. And in some ways, they can talk about like, well, you need a community benefits agreement. You need to make sure that the merchants know what's going to happen. You need to get compensation for the merchants if they're displaced, or if there's construction, they need to have construction mitigation. So like providing these opportunities for people to connect with one another and say like, well, we don't have all the answers, but we can tell you what worked for us or what didn't work for us, and finding that they're not alone in doing these works, by themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, you both mentioned, peer engagement and mentorship. In our research, and I'm really glad to hear you talk about that, because it can be easy sometimes to get to kind of get wrapped up in kind of what new innovative thing is out there for capacity building training programs and such, but also the fundamentals really, really, really matter. In our research, about 80% of the executive directors of community development organizations, 80% of the executive directors of color, don't think there's enough peer mentorship or peer learning opportunities or mentorship opportunities in the field for them. And those are the fundamentals, and we need to do better at that. So I'm glad you both mentioned that. So let's shift gears a little bit to resource providers, funders. Are there barriers you think that they face when attempting to prioritize community voices when funding either your organizations or funding your member organizations?
I'll certainly say yes, especially because a lot of our work, we deal with banks, and oftentimes the relationship is more so based on deals, right? And it really lends to not addressing the needs that the community developers may need, and more so pushing their own agenda or their own objective to kind of reach their goals. So certainly with the lack of capital, and we need more fair lending practices to our community members and our community developers that are actually building homes and projects. So we have to be very mindful of some of the programs that are out there. And I know people are familiar with these special purpose credit programs. And at the surface level, they seem like they're really great, right? Like there's a set aside pot of money to go to these community members and these community developers, and they're going to get access to these resources. Well, in fact, it's really another extended arm for us, perpetuating systemic racism, because if the lending processes or practices were fair across the board, why do we need to create these types of programs, right? So it really goes back to that cultural competency piece, and looking at the training of the people who are reviewing the loans, and why we even have to create these types of programs. And then even looking at a deeper dive into systemic racism, especially the policies and intentionally have been put in place, and we'll look at banking because we were talking about capital and funding, or even with foundations, to suppress the community, ultimately leading in a lack of trust. And I mean, rightfully so, right? Because we're still experiencing this huge gap in wealth, in racial wealth gap. So I think it's 2022, $100 in wealth held by a white household was literally only $15 in a Black household, right? And it was reported that Black wealth increased during the pandemic time, but others increased as well, right? So the gap continued to grow. So we have to continue to look at these things and the lending processes and what the systemic racism really does and impact how systemic racism impacts our communities that we serve and us as leaders of color, right? And our access to capital and fair lending processes. So I think these are absolutely barriers to resources, and it limits and stifles us in what we really can do to create change for the communities that we serve, because it makes it much more difficult when we have to fight all of the other barriers and then this on top of that, right? So it just makes it incredibly challenging for our members who are the service providers and more so the communities that we serve, and it impacts them in the hardest way.
Yeah, I want to echo that lending practices have been affecting like our communities of color. Many times there are in the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities, there are experienced developers, but there's also, you know, folks that are like, we want to buy a building and this is our first building. So we've never done it before. And, you know, coming up with the capital and having the expertise to be able to do that is something that, you know, that they're struggling with. And, you know, a lot of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities are in like the hottest real estate market. So, you know, whereas one, you know, organization is like, I can buy my building for like $500,000. And, you know, in, you know, New York City, you cannot buy a building for $500,000. So like, you know, how can, you know, we try to level that playing field and have enough resources going into that. The other one thing that I want to share is like, sometimes our funders are very quantitative base. They want quantitative measures, and it goes against this, you know, what we've been talking about for the last 2 hours about really engaging residents and serving them. You know, like a funder might say, like, how many housing counseling sessions did you have, or how many small business leaders have you met with? But they don't get out the quality of, you know, those interactions and how important it is for, you know, the organizations in the community to do that work, you know, to have that work in language, you know, so that people understand, you know, like the housing counselors understand the situations that people are in. It's like, oh, well, we know, you know, so for example, that if you're starting a business in some Asian American communities, you might get a loan or a gift from your friends. Is that a loan or a gift? But you know, and then, you know, some folks say like, it depends. If I do well, it's a loan, you know, like if it's not, if I don't, it's a gift and I don't have to pay back, you know. So there's these nuances that happen in the interactions. But if you're just asking for sheer numbers, like you're missing the quality of those relationships and capacity building built.
And if I could just jump in and amplify that, thank you, Erica, for saying that. And I am very appreciative of hearing that, and on so many different panels as well, right? So people are starting to have more conversations around that notion that we have to look at the quality and the actual work that's being done versus the quote unquote product, right? Or production of some numbers, and really looking at people versus just numbers. So output, you know, versus outcome. So it's very, very important. And I'm glad that you uplifted that, because we experience it every day. And sometimes it's not all about the number, right? It's about what changes were you able to make in the work that you did, or what lessons did you learn to make the next opportunity better than the last one. So as long as we all continue to keep pushing that message across the board, I think we'll eventually not have to say that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier, you know, we have a research project into community development organizations, and we found that the average organization does 9 different things on average, and organizations led by a person of color or who serve communities of color, that number goes up. And affordable housing development is one of those things, right? Or the others are workforce development, local advocacy, local arts engagement, youth services, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're funding, as I think it was Leatrice, you said earlier, if you're getting capital for affordable housing development, great, and that's a really good product. But as we say at the Alliance, that serves to fund what you do, not necessarily who you are. And so when we talk about the identity of community organizations, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those 9 things, right? And and you're not quite achieving your mission if you're only doing one. So we have time for one last question. And if I could fanboy a little bit with Erica. Erica and I know each other from our years in the creative placemaking field. And Erica can talk circles around me about her depth and experience in that. But I hear echoes of that, Erica, and I have throughout the last 2 hours. How can, for everyone here, how can what you've learned in your time in the creative placemaking field and doing that kind of work, how can those strategies be leveraged to center resident voices in community development?
Well, I mean, I think arts and culture and storytelling strategies are great ways to get people involved. Sometimes you have a community meeting and you're like, yeah, come and make sure you have food. But what also are community members being asked to do, and how is their lived experience being honored? So I'm gonna lift up this book. Well, you could see this is a San Francisco senior resident, and it was part of an exhibit that Chinatown CDC did called Chinatown Pretty. So we know that our seniors are important, but we also wanted to show it and have their voices uplifted. So there's a writer and photographer that loves seniors, and they went around photographing these seniors for their particular fashion style. So it's kind of like accidental Chinese hipster, and they have, they're making fashionable choices, in their daily lives, but they're also showing that they're living these independent lives. And by highlighting these seniors and, what they do and, some of their stories, we want to say these people are important for this neighborhood, and we don't want to see them displaced. And so we need more affordable housing. We need transit. We need small businesses to thrive in this area for them. And so that's just a way of trying to use an exhibit, photographs, stories as a way to say our community is important, and have the residents have their voices, captured, in a book, in an exhibit, in a website. And other people could go oh, that's like my grandma, and I never thought of my grandma as fashionable, but so in a creative way, trying to get at some issues and values that are important, and why we do the work.
Great. Well, if everyone could join me in thanking Leatrice and Erica for their expertise and time and presence here today, we'd appreciate it. I think what we're going to do, I'm going to transition back to Curtis, our MC and leader for this afternoon or morning, depending where you are. If you have questions for Leatrice or Erica, we'll take it now, kind of when we do Q&A with everybody. So Curtis, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks so much, Frank. Again, to all of our panelists today, we're so incredibly grateful for your presence and your voice. With that, we are opening up the Q&A. And so if you have any general questions or panelist-specific questions, now is the time to upload those so that we can see them in real time and get those answered. And with respect to your time, we'll be closing here shortly. So I just want to give it a minute or two so we can avoid the awkward silence of virtual meetings and wait to see if any cute questions pop up. All right. It appears we have a question from Steve. What kinds of activities do you use to build relationships between community members? It's twofold. What kinds of community-based research do you use? And so any of our panelists who would like to take that on, you are more than welcome to show your video and unmute yourself and share a response.
Well, Curtis, this is Kathy, and I think, let's see if I can bring my camera back in. So I think, we always talk about how healthy and how nourishing food is. Food goes a long way. And I will also say that having people have a sense of belonging. And so an example that we use that has really brought our community into the fold is we have t-shirts, and on the t-shirt it says, "I am the fifth," which means that they have a voice, they have an opportunity to speak, they are part of community, and on the 5th of every month, we wear those t-shirts. And it took us a while for that to connect. But now, when people come to meetings, we know they are in community because they'll have on those t-shirts. We give them away at every event, and it's a small token just for people to recognize and say, you matter and you belong. Another great opportunity that we had as an organization, we participated in LISC Great Opportunity Go Neighborhoods. And that opportunity allowed us to have what we call some early action project money. And so many of our smaller grassroots organizations always had events and endeavors that they wanted to complete, but they never had the resources. This allowed us to give grants as small as $1,000 and up to $5,000 to some of those small organizations to help their dreams become reality. And believe me, that goes a long way in relationship building, particularly when you have large community development organizations and the community's perception is that they get all of the money. Well, this is a way for us to put it back into community and people to know that we're investing in their ideas and implementation of their programs as well. And so it went a long way. So if you're in a city with a LISC organization, look up Great Opportunity Neighborhoods. They have early action project money, and it goes a long way in community.
Thank you so much for that response, Kathy. We greatly appreciate it. Multiple times today, food has been mentioned, so we can't forget the power of the table. Chastity, did you want to respond to that question also?
Yeah, well, I'll say, like, for me, the biggest thing has been social media. Oh, let me know if you guys can hear me, because I actually switched rooms. I'm back in the classroom now, so I don't know if the internet service stayed strong. Okay, I'll say our biggest thing has been social media for me, and being able to get 5 senses out there. And luckily for me, I don't know if you guys remember, but Miss Kathy mentioned that the neighborhood that we live in, it's literally 40 acres, which is 22 streets. And reluctantly for me, being in the neighborhood, born and raised in the neighborhood, I know everybody. So when it comes down to community events and things like that, it's really I haven't seen any complications. The only thing that has been complicated for me is outside resources, because I've, for so many years, or the years that I've been doing this, I've been so pro Douglas. So back in 2023, me outbreaking into other communities like the Fraser community here in Memphis with Seed to Market with Miss Camille, we've actually been able to connect with them and inviting them over to the Douglas community and seeing what we have. So basically this, and that's one of the things on my agenda as well for the Douglas community, is getting outside organizers and developers to come to us. Because as Miss Kathy mentioned earlier with the bus trip that she had, they gave a tour of North Memphis but did not come to Douglas. Douglas is a small community that has been forgotten about. That's how we feel. It's an elder-based community. I'm really the youngest one there. So, and another one of the difficulties that I do want to mention is that age bridge gap, that the age gap. Seeing that I'm in the late 20, early 30s age group, and everybody else that I have to reach out to is the elders, the 60s and 70s. It's not as hard because they've all known me, but the level of respect, it seems kind of an issue because they remember me from being knee high to a grasshopper. And now that I'm talking about community development and change, not saying that they don't want to engage, it's just that they feel that their time has now come and gone. And I'm like, no, your time, you're still here. So just letting them know, like, hey, you're still here. You're still alive and breathing and well and kicking. Like, I need you. I didn't come out the womb dropping seeds. I learned from you guys. So, come out and help me and teach. So basically, just connecting has been the connecting and bridging that gap has been one of the difficulties, but also one of the brightest aspects of this project.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Oh,
I
go
know
ahead,
Chris
Eric.
is probably going to cut me off.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
But one example that I thought you all in Tennessee might be interested in, like Little Tokyo Service Center, and worked with an artist in resident, and there was a number of like garden plots. And what she did is she went around and she interviewed all the people with garden plots. What are you growing? Why are you growing it? What's significant about the vegetables that you're growing, like Asian vegetables that you don't normally get at the regular grocery store? And so she like collected all these stories. She made a map, and then like everyone could like learn about each other because they they each had a write-up, and you learned like, oh, my neighbor is growing these things because of this reason. And so it's a way to try to build resident connection. But also a capacity building, like capacity building could be in lots of ways. And we're working on a research project, but we're trying to like broaden, like, what is capacity building? Is it just like technical work to be able to afford to build affordable development? And we've come up with some like different categories, like knowledge capacity. Do you know your community history and all that's gone on, that then, connects you with others? Is it relational capacity? Like, how well connected are you? Economic, creative, effective, and political capital are all like ways that we're looking at capacity building. And it's hard to try to measure it. Like, how do we know that a community has arrived and has political agency? Still trying to figure it out, but trying to get at all of those different levels, because that's all a part of neighborhood building.
Thank you, Erica, for that. I greatly appreciate it. There's always space. There's always a little room for more. So appreciate your response. With that, I want to say thank you to all of the panelists. Phenomenal job. And certainly I've been deeply impacted myself by this work. Going to pass the baton to Frank, and then we'll close.
Thanks, Curtis. Thank you, everyone. I'll be real brief. I would just like to recognize that everyone here, you're part of something bigger than yourself. We can't do this apart. We have to do it together. And if you ever ask what a community organization does, also ask who they are. So thank you. Curtis, want to close this out?
Will do. And thank you, Frank. Timely quote. Thank you, everyone, for your participation today. You'll note that a survey pops up when you close the Zoom meeting, so we can hear feedback on our time together today. And we appreciate you for joining us. Shouts out to Community Opportunity Alliance, Third Space Action Lab, and all of our panelists. Have a good day.